Welcome to your video on finding distance between 2 points. First of all, let's begin with a right triangle. Right triangle has very distinct parts. First of all, this is a right triangle because we have a right angle here. These two sides are called the legs. The side opposite the right angle, or across from the right angle, is called the hypotenuse. It is always the diagonal side in a right triangle. So the Pythagorean theorem connects the legs and the hypotenuse. The Pythagorean states that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That means the sum of the squares of the legs. So you have the two legs, the squares of the legs, and the sum of those is equal to the square of the hypotenuse. So the hypotenuse squared. Let's find the measure x. First of all, is it a right triangle? Yes. Which side is this? It is the hypotenuse. So using a squared plus b squared equals c squared, we can rewrite it as 6 squared plus 12 squared equals x squared. So this leg squared plus this leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. Let's solve this. 6 squared is 36. 12 squared is 144 equals x squared. Combine those two. X squared equals 180. Those two make 180. To find x, we need to take the square root of both. When you take the square root of that, you get x. When you take the square root of that, we can rewrite like this. Now you can use a calculator to calculate this. Calculator will tell you the square root of 180 is 13.42. However, if you have no calculator and you're asked to simplify this answer is fine. However, it can be made more simple. We can think of 180 as 36 times 5. Basically, we're trying to create multiplication where we have a perfect square. 36 is a perfect square, so we can take the square root of 36. The square root of 36 is 6, but the square root of 5 we leave like that. So this is the same as this. It is just a simplified form. So again, this is the same as that, is the same as that, but this is a simplified form of that. Let's look at another one. Let's find x here. Well, let's use Pythagorean theorem, right? No way. This is not a right triangle. It might be, but we don't see the little box here to show us it's right triangle. And actually, if you look at the angle, it doesn't look like a right angle. If it's not a right triangle, we can't use the Pythagorean theorem. So this question we're going to leave unsolved. Here's another one. This is a right triangle. We have the box here. Let's use Pythagorean theorem. This time we are missing a leg. We don't have a leg. We have a leg here, and we have the hypotenuse. So these have to be filled in based on what we have. 17 is put here for c squared because that's the hypotenuse. And then we have one leg, 8 squared, and we don't have the other leg. So x squared plus 64, because 8 squared is 64. 17 squared is 289. Now this has to be solved using a different step. To solve for x squared, we need to subtract 64 from both sides. When you subtract 64 here, you're left with x squared only. When you subtract 64 here, you have 225. Take the square root of both sides. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 225, well, 225 is a perfect square. It's 15, because 15 times 15 makes 225. So your answer is 15 for that length. Now this we can extend to distance between 2 points. If you have 2 points, let's say 2, 3, and 9, 8, and somebody says, give me the distance between those 2 points. Well, the first thing to do is to recognize that's what we're looking for. The next thing to do is to see that actually you can always make a right triangle. When you have one diagonal side, you can always make a right triangle. So the goal here is to make a right triangle and then use the Pythagorean theorem. So I'm going to make a right triangle like this. That's easy to do on a coordinate plane. And then use the Pythagorean theorem. In order to use the Pythagorean theorem, we need to know how long these sides are, or the legs. If this leg begins at the x value of 2, and this leg ends at the x value of 9, we can figure out the length of this by doing 9 minus 2, and the length of this must be 7. The same we can do here. This one begins at 3 on the y-axis and ends at 8 on the y-axis. So we can do 8 minus 3, and we can figure out that the length of this is 5. Now we can use the Pythagorean theorem. So 7 squared plus 5 squared equals d squared, the hypotenuse. 49 plus 25 equals d squared. These added up make 74 equals d squared. Taking the square root of both sides, we get 8.6.